I get it. You guys love hearing haunted house stories, especially when they come from people like your neighbors, right? Well, stick around because in this video I'm going to tell you about my neighbor's most terrifying haunted house story ever. And let me tell you, she saved this one for last. But before I jump into that, I'll introduce myself. I'm Dark Whispers, who makes regular videos about all things paranormal, including ghosts, hauntings, real-life ghost stories, and more. So if you enjoy these kinds of videos, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on future uploads. I've got plenty more where this one came from. With all that being said, let's jump right into this video. The story I'm about to tell you comes from a neighbor of mine who shall remain nameless. She's an older woman, probably in her late 60s or early 70s. A sweet lady who always has the nicest things to say and is extremely friendly. But anyway, she told me this story in parts over the course of a few months. Each time we would meet outside our apartments, we would chat for a few minutes and then she would go on about these haunting stories. I was intrigued and at the same time creeped out. But she's obviously not scared of sharing these stories with me, so I figured she might be wanting to share them with others. So here we are. This is what she told me. The first story she told me was about her moving into her apartment. As I mentioned before, she's pretty old. She said that she bought the place back in the 80s. When she was going through the closing papers, there was a clause in the contract that stated that she would have to keep the home exactly how it was when she purchased it. Apparently, the previous owner wanted the home to look exactly the same for future buyers. It was odd, but not really any of her business, so she just agreed to it. So she bought the place and moved on in. Fast forward a year later, she was sitting in her living room watching TV when she heard footsteps coming down the hallway. She said they sounded like someone walking in high heels. Then she heard them stop right outside her door. For a moment, she heard nothing, so she opened up her door to see what was out there. But when she did, she noticed that the hallway was completely empty. No one was there. Still curious, she walked out into the hallway to see if she could see anyone, but no one was there. She shut her door and continued to watch TV until it happened again. Footsteps coming down the hallway, stopping right outside her door, and then silence. Again, she opened her door and stepped out into the hallway to see if she could see anything, but nothing was there. She said that this happened several times throughout the evening. Not knowing what else to do, she went to bed. In the morning, she had those same footsteps again, only this time it seemed like they were closer. So she went out into the hallway once again to find nothing. She said that after a while, those footsteps stopped, but every now and then she would still hear them echo through the apartment. It was driving her insane. So she called the previous owner to ask if he knew anything about it. He said, "What do you mean?" Confused, she explained to him about the footsteps and asked if he knew anything about it. He responded by saying, "Oh, yeah, I forgot to tell you about that." She waited for him to explain, but he didn't. Instead, he just said that he would send someone over later to take a look at it. A few hours later, a man showed up to her apartment. She opened the door and he introduced himself as the handyman. She explained to him what was going on, and he nodded his head as if he already knew. He walked past her without saying a word and went into the apartment next door. She heard him talking to someone inside that apartment, and then he came back to her and said, "Don't worry, ma'am, I took care of it." Relieved, she thanked him and closed the door. That was the end of that. She never heard those footsteps again. One day, while she was out running errands, she was at the local grocery store picking out some fresh fruit. As she turned the corner, she saw a basket of apples. In that moment, she felt compelled to pick up one of those apples. As she walked to the checkout line, she thought nothing of it. Later on, while eating on her couch, she peeled the apple skin off and noticed something peculiar. The apple had no seeds inside. She thought it was strange, but it wasn't enough to freak her out. So she threw the core away and went back to watching her show. Later that night, she was awoken from her sleep by heavy footsteps. They sounded like someone stomping their feet directly above her ceiling. She sat there for a moment trying to figure out what it was. Then suddenly her ceiling started to crumble. She quickly ran to her bedroom to hide under the covers. She looked over to where the noise was coming from and watched as chunks of ceiling rained down onto her floor. And when she looked over to the spot where her fruit bowl was sitting, it was completely crushed. She crawled out from underneath the covers and stepped over to the destroyed bowl and picked up a piece of the ceiling. In her hand, she realized that the ceiling was made up of newspapers. And when she looked closer at those newspapers, the dates on them said the exact same day that she picked up that seedless apple. To this day, she doesn't know why that ceiling was made of newspaper or why it fell down the day that it did. She also told me another story, which I'll mention briefly since it doesn't really pertain to this story. Basically, she was fixing up some parts of the house when she needed to remove wallpaper. As she began peeling the wallpaper away from the wall, she noticed that there were pictures hidden underneath the wallpaper. She carefully peeled the pictures away and realized that they were pictures of men and women dressed in clothing from the 1800s. After seeing this, the faces of those people started to fade away. She tried to grab them so that she could preserve them, but her hands went straight through them like they were ghosts. So she backed away from the wall and watched in horror as those pictures completely disappeared. Now, before I continue, I should mention that she lives in a 2-story building. Her apartment is on the 2nd floor. Now, the story that she saved for last goes a little something like this. One night, she was woken up by what sounded like screams in the middle of the night. At first, she thought that they were coming from outside the apartment. Maybe it was some kids playing or maybe a couple arguing. She didn't know. But then she realized that the screaming was coming from inside the walls. She sat there for a moment, listening intently to try and figure out what it was. Then she heard something new. It sounded like someone dragging themselves across the floor above her. Those dragged footsteps slowly made their way from the apartment above her directly above her bedroom to the end of the hallway, which was directly outside of her bedroom. She started to get scared. What if it was an intruder? Was someone in her apartment? What if they were hiding in the closet? Then the dragging sounds stopped. She waited there for a moment until she heard footsteps coming down the hallway. The footsteps slowly approached her bedroom door, then stopped right outside of it. She held her breath as she listened intently to see if whatever was out there would move again. Then she heard her doorknob start to turn. Her mind raced. She was thinking that whoever was out there was about to barge into her room. But then the doorknob stopped turning, and whatever was out there walked away. She stayed tucked underneath her covers until morning, too afraid to move. When she finally got up, she went to her door to see if it was damaged, but everything seemed okay. All that she noticed was that the brass on her doorknob had started to tarnish. And although it was only slightly discolored, she swore that before that it was shining bright. So that's the scariest haunted house story that my neighbor has ever experienced. I thought it was crazy when she told me, so I figured that you guys might think the same thing. Also, I've got plenty more videos where I share haunting stories like these. So if you want to hear more, make sure to check out my other videos. Thanks for watching. See you soon.